Today, we're going to learn all of the secrets that Sherri Papini didn't want you to know. Inside these court documents, we can finally, for once, shed some light on what actually happened to Sherri Papini. Where was she for these 3 weeks? What really happened? Most of us who are following this story knew that Sherri Papini was lying about her fantastical story of two Latino women beating her and trying to sell her to a cop. But what really was going on hasn't been revealed until now. Before we go to those court documents, you might remember the day she was found. It was a miracle. Sherri Papini is alive. Here they are on Fox News.
Police releasing brand new video of the California mom found chained and beaten on the side of the road after she says she was kidnapped. This is surveillance video that you're looking at, and it shows Sherri Papini running unshackled through a church
Does it show her? The Bigfoot footage. It's a quality we're looking
parking
at.
lot at 4:15 on the morning she was found. She was spotted just 7 minutes later on the freeway with a chain around her waist and clamps on her wrist. Papini claims she was abducted by two Hispanic women and held for 3 weeks.
So she did claim that. She said that two Hispanic women had held her, they kidnapped her for these weeks, and that they were keeping her away from her family and everybody else. She gave a description, and this is what she said they looked like. The whole thing was quite obviously a lie. But how do we get from that to the breaking news this week that, hey, Sherri Papini is actually in jail?
Shocking developments in the Sherri Papini kidnapping investigation. She was reported missing in Redding back in November 2016. 3 weeks later, she was found beaten on the side of I-5 in Yolo County. But just hours ago, this story took a major turn. Papini is now behind bars tonight.
She is indeed behind bars, charged with kidnapping and defrauding California for taking money that it's intended for actual victims. So I want to go into these actual court documents, but first, what are the questions we're looking to answer today? Stay with me until the end here because we will answer all of these. Was Sherri Papini actually kidnapped? And I can also line up what I think is going to be her defense in this court case, and it's really interesting and could possibly work for her. Where was she for the 3 weeks that she was missing? Did somebody attack her? Because let's remember, when they found Sherri Papini on Thanksgiving Day, she had bruises and cuts and scrapes all over her. She looked like she had been attacked. Why was she so skinny? She was malnourished and well underweight when they found her. Also, her hair had been chopped off by somebody, but we had always heard that she was somebody who took her hair very seriously and wouldn't have done this. Who branded Sherri Papini? And what was that brand? It was never revealed until now. And was her husband aware at any time that all of this was going on? So here we go. These are the actual court documents. This is the United States District Court for the Eastern District of California and the United States of America versus Sherri Papini, as you can see right here. This case, with these documents just released, outlines these things that have been kept secret in nowhere but Sherri Papini's brain for so long. To get down into the most important part of this that reveals what actually happened in those weeks that she was gone, we have to look at this part right here. The FBI's discovery that Sherri Papini had actually been with a former boyfriend the entire time. This explains almost everything. On September 26, 2019, SCSO detectives submitted a letter to BFS requesting a familial DNA search for the unknown male DNA contributor found on Papini's underwear. They never found those two women, but they did find a male DNA strand left behind. On March 19th, 2020, the Familial Search Committee voted to release final familiar search result to provide analytical assistance in an effort to identify the unknown male DNA. So they took this DNA they had from Sherri Papini's underwear, they ran it through all of the tests, and they found that there were some relatives to this person that came back, one of whom was her ex-boyfriend. There you go. Now you've got some alarm bells going on. The DNA in Sherri Papini's underwear matches that of her ex-boyfriend. So they wanted to talk to him naturally. An investigation into the ex-boyfriend revealed he was briefly associated with an address owned by Papini's parents. So they tracked this guy down. They also showed ex-boyfriend's brother's social media pages had identified a table similar in appearance to the table Papini described to law enforcement in August 2017 as the table her abductors strapped her on and branded her on. So they said, ooh, this also matches photographs that are very similar to what Papini suggested the inside of the house looked like that she was at. So they talked to him. Here we are. On August 10th, 2020, investigators interviewed ex-boyfriend who told them the following. Here are the juicy details in this case that you've been waiting for. Ex-boyfriend admitted to investigators he helped Papini, quote, run away. Ex-boyfriend explained that Papini was a good friend and she asked him for help. You see, they both had burner phones, and Sherri Papini was talking to this ex-boyfriend. She said that her husband beat her, attacked her, raped her, and that she needed somebody to help her out. This was the story that she gave to this ex-boyfriend, and he thought he was trying to help her escape all of this. Papini told the ex-boyfriend she had filed police reports, but the police weren't doing anything. Of course, there haven't been any police reports fired, but she was fantastical in her making up of stories of her victimhood. So, ex-boyfriend and Papini had known each other since they were 13 or 14 years old, had a long history together as friends. The two also had a romantic relationship and had previously been engaged. So he shows up, and after some communication on these burner phones, he picks her up at the house, at her house, gives her the address, and or she gives him the address, and then he picks her up at the house. He had a friend rent a car for him, and he drove up to Redding, California. When the ex-boyfriend got to Redding, he went to Trader Joe's and brought some stuff and ate breakfast. He stopped at Starbucks and waited to hear from Papini about where he should drive to meet her. The ex-boyfriend believed Papini communicated with him on his prepaid phone using a prepaid phone she already had. Then he drove over to the house that she was living at with her husband, and he picked her up. She was quiet almost the entire trip back to his house. She didn't say anything the whole time. Now, at this point, nobody is looking for Sherri Papini, but shortly afterwards, they are. During the period of her disappearance, this says, Sherri Papini never once left the ex-boyfriend's residence. Papini asked the ex-boyfriend to pick up clothes for her to wear. The ex-boyfriend purchased sweats, socks, and t-shirts from Target, TJ Maxx, or Ross, so he was buying her some clothes because she had no extra clothes on her. He continued to work every day while Papini stayed at the residence. Ex-boyfriend slept on the couch in the living room, and Papini had her own room. Ex-boyfriend lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and she selected the room she wanted to stay in. This room was a dark room away from everything, and believe it or not, these two didn't even have sex. She stayed in this room for most of these days that she was gone, missing, all by herself, according to this ex-boyfriend. He even said, it might sound bland, but we really just talked. We hung out and we ate food, but we didn't go anywhere. Papini cleaned the house a couple of times and did whatever she thought she needed. She was feeling for herself, she was in her own thing. She had a lot of private time. She wanted to be in her room with the door shut, according to the ex-boyfriend. And he's like, most of the time I wasn't even there. Now, this is going to go into what I think Papini's defense is going to be, which I'll tell you as we continue. But Papini once said that she was in this room that had boarded up windows. These two women, as she described them, put her in her room, blared music, and she had boarded up windows, which she claimed one time she pried off, only to get punished with this brand that she had on her back, which we'll get into in a moment here. So what you're going to find now is that many of the pieces of the story that Sherri Papini told investigators line up with her actual experience at the ex-boyfriend's house. The room was as she described it. The closet, which she described as having a pole that she was chained to, was as she described it. But she wasn't chained to a pole. She was using the actual things that she saw during this experience. Spending so much time alone in this room, it was almost as if she was trying to give herself a fantasy version of the experience that she would eventually tell police about. Think about that for a moment. During the interview with the ex-boyfriend, investigators asked him if Papini did anything with the window in the room when she stayed at his house. The ex-boyfriend told investigators there were boards over the window, so she couldn't see. There was no light coming in. She wanted it to be dark. Ex-boyfriend said he put the boards over the window because Papini asked him to, and stated, she asked me if there was a way to seal the window up. He described the wood he used to cover the window as 3 sheets of particle board or press board. And that's why this happened a couple of days, according to him, after she arrived at his house to stay. Now, why was she so skinny, right? That's one of the main questions that we have here. Was Sherri Papini actually kidnapped? Her ex boyfriend says no. She said she needed to be rescued. He rescued her and she was staying at his house. She was there for the 3 weeks while she was, quote unquote, missing. But what about the fact that she was malnourished and that somebody attacked her? She had bruises all over her. Well, her ex boyfriend believed Papini was purposely trying to lose weight while she was staying with him. This all sounds so premeditated. Papini ate whatever the ex boyfriend bought, would eat small portions of this. She wasn't eating as much as she would just minimize what she was eating. Both ex boyfriend and Papini made food for them to eat, but she would eat like half a banana instead of a whole banana. She was already tiny, but said she wanted to lose weight. Yeah, she was indeed tiny. I mean, you could see that she was 5'3", 105 pounds on her missing poster. But when they found her, she was like 60, 70 pounds. She was way, way, way down in weight, like a child's weight. Investigators asked the ex boyfriend what happened to Papini's hair. Remember, this was another of the major questions that we have. What happened to her hair? Well, the ex boyfriend said she chopped that. The ex boyfriend came home from work one day and Papini had cut her hair. The ex boyfriend could not remember what Papini did with the hair she cut off and did not know if she had thrown it in the trash. She cut her hair off within a few days of coming to stay with him. It's one of the first things that she did. What about those injuries? Because again, that's on our list of major questions in the Sherri Papini case. And now we know, according to the ex boyfriend who will testify to this, about the injuries she had when she was discovered. The ex boyfriend explained Papini created the injuries while staying with him, including hitting herself to create bruises and burning herself on her arms. The ex boyfriend said he helped her to create some of the injuries, although he never laid his hands directly on her. For example, she told him to bank a puck off my leg, like a hockey puck. Hit her in the leg with a hockey puck. So he shot a puck off her leg lightly, he said. I don't know how you do that. Ex-boyfriend did not help Papini burn her arm. He said that was a self-inflicted thing. I didn't burn anything on her arm there. The ex-boyfriend admitted to investigators he was confused by Papini injuring herself, and he said there's not too many people that come up and say, hurt me. I'm not one to physically harm women. I don't want to do this. Papini did not start creating the injuries until she was close to the time deciding to leave to go back home. He thought she was going to stay maybe forever or for a long period of time. Now we go back to our questions. She attacked her. She was the reason why she was so skinny. And we now know she cut off her hair in the early days that she was staying with this ex-boyfriend. But what about that brand? It was one of the big secrets. We never learned what it was. Well, the police didn't tell us what it was because they wanted to keep that information secret. Anybody who knew, in this case, the ex-boyfriend, must have known because they were actually there. You know they're not making it up because they couldn't have read a report, an article, or a podcast or whatever that would explain to them what happened here. Now we know. The ex-boyfriend described to investigators how Papini asked him to brand her. Papini told the ex-boyfriend to purchase a wood-burning tool from Hobby Lobby. So they went to Huntington Beach to go to Hobby Lobby, and he bought the tool. By this time, they say Papini was aware of news stories about her disappearance and didn't want people to see her. The ex-boyfriend clarified he and Papini did not watch television because he didn't have one at the time. So he goes and gets this wood-burning tool. They said it was about the size of an electric toothbrush, and they said that this is what they were going to use. When the ex-boyfriend returned with the wood-burning tool, he and Papini sat on the floor next to an electrical outlet so they could plug the tool into the outlet. The ex-boyfriend sat behind Papini, and Papini pulled her shirt up so that ex-boyfriend could use the tool to make the brand. Papini told the ex-boyfriend the phrase she wanted burned onto her skin. He couldn't remember the phrase, but it had meaning to Papini. I'll tell you what it is in just a second. Ex-boyfriend recalled that he branded Papini's right shoulder using the wood-burning tool. He said it was the right shoulder because he was left-handed and he remembered all of this stuff. He got her some burn cream. He said she barely reacted to him branding her with this. Now, what the other investigation revealed was that it was something about eclipse or something else. Really, it was just a mess of an actual mark that was made on her shoulder that was kind of indecipherable as a brand itself. But I'll get into that momentarily. Then she got a rash, they said, and then they say now it got time to be time for Papini to leave. Shortly before Thanksgiving, she said, "Please take me home." His friend rented a car once again, and they drove back. She was quiet on the way and threw out her burner phone out the window and threw a bag of her belongings into the dumpster outside the ex boyfriend's residence. He then dropped her off, and the police have confirmed they have corroborating evidence to suggest that his story is indeed true, from rental car receipts to all kinds of other information that actually matches what was going on here. Let me see. To wrap things up, what the police included in this court document was a follow up interview with Papini. But before we wrap everything up, I also want to address why this happened now and some other questions that I might have. Then on to what Sherri Papini is probably going to use for her defense. So they confronted Sherri Papini because they wanted to get her with the charge of lying to law enforcement. Investigators showed Papini a series of photographs from her ex boyfriend's residence, and she falsely denied it was the location she was at when she was missing. They showed her a picture of the closet with the pole through the shelving, the picture that Papini drew of the closet with the pole in previous interviews. She said, "It's a little bit different, but it's pretty, excuse my language, it's pretty effing similar. But it's different. It didn't look like that. It didn't look like that." She understands the house of cards is now falling. They show her all of this stuff that's in this house and they give her the evidence. And Papini continues to lie to police. She says she doesn't want to find the woman. I don't want to find her. I don't want to find her, I guess. I don't want to get her in trouble. I know there's no way it's my ex-boyfriend. There's no way. There's no way. Now, her husband was in the room with her for some of this, and she asked her husband to leave at one point. And she then, when the husband was out of the room, said, "I was talking to other guys and I'm horrible." This makes it pretty clear that even to this point, the husband doesn't know that Sherri Papini was lying, that Sherri Papini was with her ex-boyfriend, that she was the one who had herself branded by this ex-boyfriend, that she was like punching herself in the face, doing injuries to herself, burning herself in the arms. Wild story. And he still seems to not know about this. I mean, I'm sure at this point he must be catching on, or one would think. Otherwise, he's just totally delusional. So they talk about how they spent the $49,000 from the GoFundMe and thousands of other dollars that came from the state of California. One of the most interesting things, obviously, is this brand. And the brand was an important piece of that story. As I said, it was what they used for the ex boyfriend to determine whether or not he was telling the truth. Now I'm getting to what actually was in this brand. She said it made a sizzling or popping sound. At some points, she said that it was a punishment for her first escape. And then at other times, she said it was from different things, that the buyer wanted her branded or whatever. This was like a metal pan. I'm going to get to this part where she actually says what it was used to brand her. She described what happened when she was branded on her back. She said in this story that the two women did it, which obviously was not the case. That's not what actually happened here. These two women didn't exist. They never had anything to do with anything. So as this was going on, she talks about all of the pain being very sharp. The interviewer asked Papini if she had any questions, and Papini asked, "Did they figure out what it says on my back?" It's really hard to see. I have to look at a picture to look at it. And then here's where Papini says, not Eclipse, Exodus. I think it's Exodus, but I can't read the numbers. It was supposed to be a Bible passage from Exodus. That's what this was all about. So now we know some things. Sherri Papini, according to the police and her ex-boyfriend, wasn't kidnapped. For 3 weeks, she was staying at her ex-boyfriend's house, and she attacked herself. She caused physical pain, burning, and other things to herself. All the while, she made herself as skinny as possible, thinking ahead. She was ready to go back, but she had to say that she was kidnapped and make up another lie, something she'd done many times in her life. She cut her own hair. She had herself branded, and the brand was of maybe a Bible verse from Exodus. And it doesn't appear, at least as far as I can tell, that she had made her husband aware of this at any point in time. So what do you think now knowing these new details about Sherri Papini? One thing I want you to know is I think that she's going to have an interesting and solid defense. You see, all Sherri Papini has to say is, "You're right. I didn't want to turn him in. It was my ex boyfriend. I was staying with him for all this time, but he kidnapped me. He was in love with me and couldn't let it go. He was stalking me, and to keep him away from my family, I was engaging in some conversations that I thought maybe would calm him down on these burner phones. But he didn't stop. And when I went on a jog, he kidnapped me. And for 3 days, he attacked me at his place. He said he would let me go if I never told anybody who it was. I wanted to get back to my kids so bad that I agreed to this. The only people that ever saw Sherri Papini at this ex boyfriend's house were the ex boyfriend's cousin, who only saw her for a fleeting moment when she ran back into a room and she could say she was kidnapped at that point, and somebody else who saw her in the window. No one else spent any time with him. So she can simply point the blame to the ex boyfriend. What do you think is going to happen here? What do you think really happened here? And why do you think it took so long? After all, some of these meetings with Sherri Papini occurred years ago. Maybe they waited through the pandemic to actually charge her. Give me your thoughts on this case if you think we're closer to finally getting the answers that we were looking for. I appreciate you watching. If you're at facebook.com/the news junkie, hit that follow button. youtube.com/the news junkie, hit subscribe. You can support me below this post if you like my videos about the news that I'm posting for you. I appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you again real soon.